For thousands of years, the Galactic Council ruled the stars. It was made up of the oldest, richest, and most powerful alien races in the galaxy. There were the tall, four-armed Krenth, who believed in strength above all else, the cold, logical Zyrics, who controlled information and technology, the silent Orvolans, who never spoke but controlled half the trade routes in the galaxy. Together they led hundreds of smaller species, keeping peace, but only on their terms. They believed no one could challenge them. They were wrong. In a shining city that floated above the clouds of the planet Zenthra, the council gathered. Their meeting hall was shaped like a massive dome, made of crystal and metal. Every wall showed live images from across the galaxy, ships flying, planets growing, and people living under council rule. At the center of the dome, the high speaker of the council, a Krenth named Vartal, stood tall. His forearms rested on the glowing console before him. "The outer colonies are quiet," he said, his voice deep and echoing. "Trade is flowing. Our fleets are strong. The galaxy remains in order." The other council members nodded. All seemed well, but then a small voice interrupted. It came from the side of the chamber. A young Zyrics technician, shaking as he walked forward. "Forgive me, honored ones," he said, bowing, "but there is a matter, a report, that may need your attention." Vartal frowned. "Speak quickly." The technician tapped on a control panel. A screen lit up, showing a blue and green planet. This world, Earth, as they call it, is making moves. They have refused mining agreements. They have started building their own ships. One of their patrol vessels destroyed a Krenth scout team last week. The chamber grew quiet. "Earth?" a soft voice said. It came from Ilaran, the Orvolan trade mistress. "That primitive world from Sector 92? They are not so primitive anymore," the technician replied. "They have learned quickly. Too quickly." Vartal crossed his arms. "Humans are reckless, loud, disorganized. They do not understand galactic law. Let them play with metal. Toys. They are no threat." But not all council members agreed. A Zyric strategist named Ilion, with glowing blue eyes and circuits running along his skin, spoke next. "I have watched them. I have read their history. They fight when cornered. They build when left alone. And they are dangerous when ignored." A silence followed. "Let me send a message to their leaders," Vartal said. "A warning. Let them know who rules this galaxy." He smiled, a sharp, toothy grin. Meanwhile, on Earth, in a command base hidden deep under the Rocky Mountains, Captain Sarah Haynes sat in front of a table covered with holograms. She was a tall woman in her late 30s, with a sharp mind and years of experience in deep space operations. Her face was calm, but her eyes were focused. Behind her, engineers and officers moved quickly. Everyone was preparing. A young officer approached. "Captain, another alien signal intercepted. This one's from something called the Galactic Council." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What did they say?" They called Earth a minor threat. They said we must stop our space operations and surrender control of the asteroid belt. Or else." Sarah chuckled. "Or else what?" "We don't know. But their ships are watching Mars now. They've moved closer." She stood up and looked at the hologram showing alien fleet positions. "They're testing us," she said, "seeing if we'll back down." She turned to her team. "Send this message to the Council. Earth does not bow." Back on Zenthra, the Council watched the reply. It was short, defiant, bold. "Earth does not bow." Some council members laughed, others looked worried. "Should we respond with force?" asked Ilion. Vartal cracked his knuckles. "Yes, but not yet. First, let them see our shadow." A plan was made. The council would send a patrol fleet, strong enough to scare, but not enough to start a war. They believed Earth would see the ships and surrender quickly. They believed Earth was still weak, still small, still under their rule. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Far from both Earth and Zenthra, in the cold silence of deep space, a human stealth ship drifted, Painted black, it blended into the stars. Inside, soldiers and scientists watched the alien fleet move toward the solar system. "They think we don't see them," one said. Sarah's voice came through the comms. "Let them come. We're ready." In the dark, Earth was waiting, watching, planning. And for the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council had no idea what was coming. The Galactic Council's fleet moved slowly toward the Earth, with hundreds of ships gliding through the black void of space. The ships were massive, each one capable of destroying entire cities with a single strike. They were equipped with advanced weapons, shield technology, and the most powerful fleets the galaxy had ever seen. They believed it would be an easy victory. Far behind on Earth, the humans were preparing for war, but not in the way the Council expected. The message had already been sent. Now, Earth was showing the first signs of something bigger than anyone could imagine. Inside Deep Space Command, the control room buzzed with activity. Holographic screens lit up the room with live data streams, star maps, and flashing warnings. Captain Sarah Haynes stood at the center, her arms crossed, eyes fixed on the monitor ahead. "Reports from Mars. They've moved closer," said Lieutenant Jackson, his voice tense. "They'll be in Earth's orbit in 12 hours. Sarah nodded, her face calm but focused. "I know, we're ready." "We need more ships," another officer said. "Our fleet can't hold off the Council's forces for long." Sarah shook her head. "We don't need more ships, we need more time, and they've already given us that." "Time for what?" asked Jackson. Sarah turned, a smile creeping onto her face. "Time to show them just how wrong they are." Far from Earth, deep in the silent reaches of space, a Galactic Council cruiser drifted toward the blue planet. On board, Commander Varric, a Krenth, looked out from his command chair. Eyes narrowed as he watched the planet grow larger on the screen. "We'll make this quick," Varric said, his voice cold and calculating. "Their ships are weak. Their technology is primitive. They won't last long against us." One of the officers nodded, eyes glued to the hologram. "The humans are nothing compared to our fleet, sir. We'll be over their planet in no time." But as the cruiser moved closer, something began to feel off. "Sir," another officer said, looking up from a sensor display, "I'm picking up strange readings. We're not the only ones in this sector. There's something else out there. And it's moving fast." Varric's gaze sharpened. "What is it?" "It's human-made," the officer replied, his voice shaking. "Oh, ship. But it's too small to be anything we've seen before. It's coming straight for us." The officer's words hung in the air for a moment as the commander looked at the data. The officer continued, "It's not showing up on our radar the way it should. It's using stealth technology. We almost didn't detect it at all." Varric's fists clenched. "This is no time for games. Open fire when we're in range." Back on Earth, Deep Space Command was buzzing with excitement. The team had been working non-stop to ready the ships they had for battle, and now, Sarah stood at the command console, watching the cruiser move into Earth's orbit. But she wasn't focused on the big ships. They didn't scare her. She was looking for the smaller signals. "The stealth ship is on track," said Commander Liu, who was overseeing operations from the ground. "We'll be in position soon." Sarah nodded. She knew that the Council thought humanity was weak. They thought that because humans were new to space, they were easy to push around. But Earth had something the Council didn't understand. They had been underestimated for so long. They had been forced to get creative. They didn't have the firepower to match the Council's fleet, but they had something else, something much more dangerous. Human ingenuity. The stealth ship drifted in the shadows of space, hidden among the stars. Lieutenant Kim sat in the pilot's seat, his hands gripping the controls tightly. He had been trained for this moment for years, and he wasn't nervous. But as he looked out at the massive Council cruiser, he couldn't help but feel a little excitement. "We have them right where we want them," Kim muttered to himself. "Captain, we're in position," said the communications officer from the back. "Good. Begin the sequence," Sarah ordered through the comms. "Understood. Activating Phase 1. The ship's sensors blinked to life. The crew of the stealth ship wasn't just going to disable the Council's fleet with firepower. They were going to confuse and disorient them, showing the galaxy just how far humans had come in a short time. They had the technology to hide from sensors, and now they were going to use it to their advantage. The Galactic Council cruiser moved closer to Earth, unaware of the danger coming their way. But suddenly, everything changed. The cruiser's sensors began to beep frantically. The onboard officers scrambled to understand what was happening. "Something's wrong," the sensor officer said, looking up in alarm. "We're being jammed. I can't get a clean reading. We're blind." Varric jumped from his chair. "How is that possible? No one can hide from our sensors." "It's human technology, sir," the officer said, voice tight with fear. "They've developed a way to mask their ships." The cruiser's weapon systems came to life, but it was too late. In the shadows, the stealth ship launched a series of electromagnetic pulses, disabling the Council cruiser's targeting systems. The ship was blinded, unable to target anything clearly. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, the stealth ship fired a warning shot. It wasn't a powerful blast. It didn't need to be. It was just a message. "We're not helpless," it said. "We're not weak." On Earth, Sarah's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. She could see the cruiser's systems going offline. "Phase 1 successful," she said, her voice calm but triumphant. "Now we move to Phase 2. Inside the Council cruiser, chaos erupted. "We can't fight back," Varric shouted. "We can't even see them." The cruiser's engines roared as it tried to turn, but it couldn't maneuver properly. Its weapons were useless, and it couldn't lock onto the human ship. Varric knew they couldn't stay in the blind spot forever. They had to fight back. He ordered a full retreat, but the damage had been done. Humanity had struck first. The Council wasn't in control anymore. The Galactic Council was in shock. The cruiser that had been sent to Earth had been completely disabled. For the first time in its long history, the mighty Council had been made to look weak. Commander Varric, the leader of the Council's attack fleet, stood on the bridge of his damaged ship, his fists clenched, his face red with anger. "This cannot be happening," Varric muttered to himself. His officers were scrambling to get the ship back online, but it was clear that they were losing control. The communications officer looked up from his screen. "Sir, I can't get a signal from the fleet. They're all reporting massive interference." Varric turned toward him. "What do you mean, interference?" The officer hesitated. "It's like someone's jamming our communications from the inside. We can't even reach the rest of our ships." Varric slammed his fist onto the console. "Impossible. Earth should be nothing more than a speck of dust in the galaxy. How are they doing this?" The silence in the room was thick with disbelief. The Council's technological superiority, which had dominated the galaxy for centuries, was being questioned by a world they had long dismissed as primitive. On Earth, Deep Space Command was in full control. The stealth ship had done its job, and now the humans had the upper hand. Inside the command center, Captain Sarah Haynes stood before a large holographic map of the galaxy. "Phase 1 is complete," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We've sent our message. Now it's time for Phase 2. "Are we ready, Captain?" Lieutenant Jackson asked. He was focused on his screen, watching the reports of the damaged Council fleet coming in. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," Sarah replied. "It's time for them to understand that humanity won't be bullied." Meanwhile, in the heart of the Galactic Council, the High Speaker, Vartal, paced back and forth in his private chambers. The images on the screens around him flickered, showing the damage done to the fleet. It was the first time in his career that he had seen such chaos from something so small and insignificant as Earth. "They cannot be this strong," Vartal said, his voice low and threatening. "They must be hiding something." He called an emergency meeting of the Council. Moments later, the entire Council gathered in their grand chamber. Vartal stood at the head of the room, his arms crossed. The other Council members, including Ilion, the Xeric strategist, looked at him with varying expressions of concern. "We have underestimated Earth," Vartal began. "They have technologies we did not expect. They've crippled one of our most advanced ships, and now they've sent a clear message. Earth does not bow to us. They're fighting back." "Their technologies are still primitive," Ilion argued, his cold blue eyes glowing. "We have the advantage in numbers and firepower. This is nothing more than a delay. We can crush them." Vartal raised a hand, signaling for silence. "That may be true, but we cannot ignore this any longer. If Earth is allowed to grow any stronger, it will be a problem for us all. They will no longer be a minor nuisance. They will become a threat." The others in the room murmured in agreement. "I suggest we send more ships," Vartal continued. "We will crush them, but not in the way they expect. We will use their own strength against them." Back on Earth, Sarah and her team had already begun preparations for the next phase. They had learned something important from the jamming technology they had used on the Council's ships. It was clear that the Council underestimated humanity's ability to adapt. "We've only scratched the surface," Sarah said to her officers as they worked. "Our message is clear, but we need to make sure they understand that Earth is not to be taken lightly." The communications officer, Lieutenant Parker, stepped forward. "Captain, we've got their response." Sarah turned toward him. "What is it?" Parker handed her a tablet displaying the message from the Council. It was a direct communication from the high speaker Vartal. Message from the Galactic Council. "Earth is nothing more than a fleeting mistake in the vastness of the galaxy. You will submit to the will of the Galactic Council or be destroyed. This is your final warning. You have shown defiance. We will show you our power." Sarah read the message with a calm expression, then handed it back to Parker. "They're not taking us seriously," she said softly. "Well, we'll make them." Turning to her team, she gave them the order. "Prepare the defense systems. We'll show them what humanity can do." Across the galaxy in the dark void of space, the Galactic Council was preparing for their next move. The Council had dispatched additional fleets, each one larger and more advanced than the last. They were confident that they could finish what they had started. After all, they were the rulers of the galaxy, and no one, certainly not a small, insignificant world like Earth, could stand in their way for long. However, as they neared Earth's orbit, they would quickly realize that they were mistaken. Back at Deep Space Command, Sarah stood at the window watching as Earth's defenses were readied. She could feel the weight of what was coming. The Council thought they were unbeatable. They thought they controlled the galaxy. But humanity was about to show them the truth. "Send the message," Sarah said to Parker. The officer nodded, and with a few quick keystrokes, the message was sent. It was a clear, direct communication. Nothing fancy. Just the truth. Message from Earth. "We are not your subjects. We are not your property. You have underestimated us for too long. We will fight for our freedom. This is your final warning. We are humanity, and we are not afraid." The message was sent across the galaxy, directly to the Council. Sarah turned away from the window and looked at her crew. Now we wait. Back on the Council's flagship, the message arrived. The high speaker Vartal stared at it in disbelief. This time the humans were not making threats. They were declaring war. The room grew tense. Vartal's voice was low, cold. "Prepare for battle," he ordered. "We will make Earth bow to us, no matter the cost." But deep in the heart of space, Earth's defenders were ready. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Galactic Council had sent its best fleets hoping to crush the defiant humans. Hundreds of ships, massive in size and power, slowly moved toward Earth. They were armed with weapons that could wipe out entire cities with a single strike. Their commanders were confident. The humans, they believed, had no chance against the might of the Council's warships, but they had underestimated Earth, and now the time for underestimating was over. Inside Deep Space Command, the control room was filled with the hum of activity. Officers worked quickly, checking data, coordinating communications, and ensuring all the systems were operational. Captain Sarah Haynes stood at the center of the room, her hands resting on the edge of the main console, her face focused. "How much time do we have?" she asked. 15 minutes, Captain," Lieutenant Jackson replied, his eyes fixed on his screen. "The fleet will enter Earth's orbit shortly." Sarah nodded, her mind working through the plan one more time. Earth had no chance of matching the Council's fleets in raw firepower, but they didn't need to. Humanity had something the Council didn't expect: a will to survive. And a surprising new weapon, one that would change the rules of this battle. Yomda. 3 is ready? Sarah asked. Ready, Captain, said Lieutenant Parker, who had been working on the new technology. The pulse generators are in place. We just need the Council to get into position. Good. Stay focused, everyone. This is it, Sarah said, her voice calm but full of determination. We show them what humanity is capable of. In the vast expanse of space, the Galactic Council fleets loomed closer to Earth. Hundreds of warships, sleek and powerful, surrounded by smaller vessels, glided silently through the stars. At the command center of the lead cruiser, Commander Varric paced back and forth. His anger had not faded since the earlier encounter with the humans. They've defied us, and they will pay, he muttered to himself, his fists clenched. No one defies the Council. His first officer, Saren, spoke up. Sir, we've completed our scans of the planet. No signs of major defenses. Their fleet is small compared to ours. We'll crush them in no time. Varric turned sharply. It's not just their fleet we need to worry about. They've already shown us they have hidden capabilities. I want eyes on the ground. Every inch of Earth's surface must be under surveillance. If there's anything else they're hiding, I want to know about it. Saren nodded. Understood. On Earth, Sarah and her crew were waiting for the first signs of the Council's approach. The clock was ticking down. The pressure was immense. But Sarah's focus never wavered. Activate the pulse generators, she ordered. A soft hum filled the control room as the power systems powered up. The generators, hidden in various locations around Earth, were designed to interfere with the Council's ships. Their technology, once so far ahead of Earth's, was about to face a surprising challenge. The pulse generators would send out a signal powerful enough to disrupt the Council's advanced sensors and weapon systems. We're in position, Parker said. Sarah looked at the main screen, which showed the advancing Council fleet. Her eyes narrowed. It's time. Let's do this. In space, the Council's fleet neared Earth. The lead cruiser, commanded by Varric, began the final approach. As they crossed into Earth's orbit, the ship's officers began preparing for the attack. Prepare to open fire, Varric ordered. Target Earth's main cities. Show them who rules this galaxy. His order was interrupted by a sudden warning sound. A blaring alarm filled the bridge. What is this? Varric shouted. Report. It's coming from Earth's surface, the sensor officer said, eyes wide with confusion. Some kind of electromagnetic pulse. It's affecting our systems. Before Varric could respond, the ship's weapons began to glitch. The targeting systems shut down. The shields flickered. The officer stared in disbelief. We've lost control of the targeting systems. We can't lock onto Earth. Varric's face twisted in fury. Impossible! Earth's primitive technology can't do this. Before he could finish, the pulse generator on the ground emitted another surge, stronger this time. A massive energy field washed over. The ships in orbit completely disrupting their weapons, shields, and communications. The entire fleet fell into chaos. Varric slammed his fist onto the console. Retreat! Pull back! But it was too late. The damage was done. Back at Deep Space Command, the room erupted with cheers as the pulse generator did its work. Sarah's eyes remained steady, but a small smile appeared on her lips. Phase 3 is a success, Sarah said. We've disabled their weapons. Now we show them who's in control. She turned to Parker. Send the message. Parker nodded and quickly typed commands into his console. Moments later, a hologram of Earth appeared on the main screen with a bold message flashing across it. Message from Earth. We are not your slaves. We are not your property. You have tried to destroy us, but you have failed. This is our planet. This is our home. Leave now or face the consequences. The Council fleet, already disoriented and vulnerable, struggled to recover. Their ships drifted aimlessly in space, their weapons useless, their communication systems down. The pulse generator had neutralized their power, rendering them defenseless. Captain, Jackson said, looking at the screen. They're completely out of position. They're vulnerable. Sarah nodded. It's time to finish this. Do we attack now? Parker asked, his fingers hovering over the controls. No, Sarah said, shaking her head. We're not here to destroy them. We just want them to understand one thing. Earth will never be a slave. We fight for our freedom. With a final, victorious look at the screen, Sarah gave the order. Send the final message. In the heart of space, Commander Varric stood, staring at the images on his display. His fleet was in ruins. He had failed. Earth had shown him, and the entire council, that they were not to be underestimated. Send a message to the High Speaker, Varric said, his voice low. Tell them that Earth is no longer under the rule of the Galactic Council. They've awakened something they can't control. Back on Earth, the crew of Deep Space Command gathered in a room, watching the final moments unfold. They had won. They had proven that humanity was more than just a tiny speck in the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with. We did it, Jackson said, a grin spreading across his face. Sarah nodded, her eyes still on the screen. We've sent our message, and the galaxy will never forget it. The Galactic Council, once the most powerful force in the universe, had been humiliated by a single, small planet, Earth. After the Council's fleets were disabled, their weapons neutralized, and their communication systems shattered, they were left with no choice but to regroup. It was the first time in centuries that the Council had been forced to retreat, and it had shaken their confidence to the core. But despite their failures, the Council was not ready to give up. They had too much to lose. Earth's defiance was an act that could not be ignored. If they allowed the humans to succeed, it would set a dangerous precedent. Other planets might follow Earth's example and rebel. The Council could not allow that. High Speaker Vartal stood in the war room of the Council's flagship, his eyes burning with anger. He had spent decades building the Council's power, and now one small planet had dared to challenge them. We've underestimated them, Vartal muttered, but we will not make that mistake again. His most trusted advisors stood in silence, waiting for his orders. We will strike again, Vartal said, his voice low and filled with resolve. But this time, we'll do it differently. We will show Earth that no one is above the Galactic Council. On Earth, Deep Space Command was preparing for the next phase. Though the victory over the Council's fleet was significant, it was clear that the war was far from over. The Council would regroup and return with greater force. Captain Sarah Haynes stood at the front of the room, watching the live feed of the Council's retreat. It was a moment of triumph, but she knew it wouldn't last long. They'll be back, Sarah said, her voice steady but filled with determination. And when they do, we'll be ready. Lieutenant Jackson stepped forward, his face serious. What are our next steps, Captain? The Council's fleets are massive. How can we fight them again? Sarah turned to face him. We don't need to fight them with more ships. We need to fight them with our ingenuity. Ingenuity? Jackson asked, puzzled. Sarah smiled, though it was a hard, determined smile. We've already shown them that they can't rely on their technology. Now it's time to use that to our advantage. We have one more surprise for them. Meanwhile, aboard the Council flagship, Vartal's anger grew as he watched Earth's broadcast. The humans were celebrating, boasting about their victory. But he knew the truth. They hadn't won yet. The Council's fleets were only the beginning. There was one final card to play, and Vartal wasn't going to let Earth get away with this challenge. Prepare the ultimate weapon, Vartal ordered. If the humans think they've won, we'll show them the full power of the Council. His top engineers and officers scrambled to begin the activation of the weapon, an ancient planet-destroying device that had been hidden away for centuries. It was a weapon that only the most powerful races in the galaxy had ever seen. And now the Council would use it to crush Earth once and for all. Back on Earth, the mood at Deep Space Command was calm, but focused. Sarah had ordered the team to prepare for the worst. She knew the Council wouldn't stay down for long. They had too much power, too many resources. But humanity had one advantage: their unpredictability. We've got one shot, Sarah said to her officers. If we don't use everything we have, they'll wipe us out. We can't win by brute force alone. We have to use our brains. This is about survival. Parker, the communications officer, spoke up. Captain, we've detected a large fleet coming toward Earth. It's the Council. They're coming for us again. Sarah's eyes narrowed. We knew they wouldn't give up. Get the pulse generators ready. This time we have to make sure they can't fight back. In space, the Council's fleet approached Earth once more. This time, however, they weren't just coming with more ships. They were bringing their ultimate weapon, the planet destroyer. The massive weapon, hidden deep within the heart of the flagship, hummed to life. The energy it radiated was enough to shake the surrounding space. If it fired, Earth would be reduced to a lifeless rock, nothing more than a memory. Commander Varric aboard the lead cruiser watched with grim satisfaction as the weapon powered up. We're going to make them regret this, Varric said, his voice filled with cold hatred. Prepare to fire. But as he gave the order, something strange happened. The Council flagship began to shake. The sensors went haywire. The energy levels of the weapon began fluctuating. What's going on? Varric demanded. We're being jammed. The sensor officer shouted. It's coming from Earth. They've activated something powerful. Back on Earth, Sarah watched the incoming fleet on her screen, but she wasn't just watching. She was waiting. She knew the Council was preparing to fire their ultimate weapon, and now it was time to spring their trap. Phase 4 is ready, Sarah said, a determined glint in her eye. Parker nodded, his hands flying over his console. The pulse is active. Their weapons systems are being disrupted. The pulse, generators on Earth were working overtime, sending out waves of energy that disrupted the Council's weapon and scrambled their systems. It wasn't enough to destroy the planet destroyer, but it was enough to slow it down, enough to give Earth's forces time to act. The Council flagship trembled under the pressure. The planet destroyer was supposed to be unstoppable, but now it was faltering. The systems that had been designed to focus the weapon's power were malfunctioning. No, this cannot be, Vartal screamed. We cannot fail. Commander Varric turned to his team. We have to fix this. Prepare for manual override. But as he gave the command, the Earth's pulse generator sent out one more, powerful blast, temporarily knocking out the energy core that powered the planet destroyer. On Earth, Sarah's team held their breath as they watched the screen. The Council fleet was in disarray. Their ultimate weapon, the one they thought would end the war, had been stopped. The balance of power was shifting. It worked, Jackson said, his voice filled with disbelief. We did it. Sarah nodded, her eyes never leaving the screen. We've only delayed the inevitable. They'll try again. But now they know they're not invincible. On the Council flagship, Vartal slammed his fist onto the console. This is far from over, he said, his voice cold with fury. Prepare for another attack. Earth has only delayed the inevitable. We will destroy them. The galaxy watched in silence as the battle for Earth raged on. The Galactic Council's fleets had retreated once, only to return with an even more terrifying weapon. But once again, Earth had proven its resilience. The Council's mighty planet, destroyer, had been halted by a force no one had expected, the ingenuity and determination of humanity. On Earth, the mood at Deep Space Command was one of cautious optimism. Sarah Haynes and her team had accomplished the impossible, but the war was far from over. The Council would not give up easily. We've delayed them, but not for long, Sarah said, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy that filled the control room. The Council's fleet, though disoriented, was regrouping, and now they were preparing for their final assault. Lieutenant Jackson approached Sarah, a concerned look on his face. Captain, the Council's fleet is almost back in formation. They're coming for Earth again. We need a plan. Sarah took a deep breath. We'll have to be ready for their final attack. They've shown us everything they've got, but we've got one thing they don't. What's that, Captain? Jackson asked. Hope. The will to survive, Sarah replied, her voice strong and unwavering. We've fought them this far, and we're not stopping now. Aboard the Council flagship, Vartal seethed with anger. His plans had been thwarted twice, and now there was no turning back. His forces were ready for one final strike, one that would end the human resistance once and for all. We've given them a chance to surrender, Vartal said, his voice cold. But they've refused. Now we will show them the true power of the Council. Commander Varric stood by his side, looking out at the fleet as it gathered for the final assault. The ships were ready, their weapons charged, their sensors scanning. For any weakness in Earth's defenses. Sir, our fleet is in position, Varric reported. We can launch the attack whenever you say. Vartal nodded. Prepare to fire on Earth's capital cities. We'll wipe out their government, their leaders, and their will to resist. Varric hesitated. What if they retaliate again? Sir, what if their generators disrupt our systems again? Vartal's eyes narrowed. We've disabled their generators. Their planet is defenseless now. We will finish what we started. Back on Earth, Deep Space Command was in a state of constant readiness. The attack was coming and everyone knew it. The last few days had been filled with long hours of planning and preparations. But now, with the Council's fleet approaching, once more it was time to put the final phase of their defense plan into action. Captain, Lieutenant Parker said, his voice urgent. The Council is almost in range. Their weapons are powering up. Sarah turned to face him. Everyone, take your stations. This is it. We've come too far to fail now. The control room hummed with activity as the team worked together. They had developed a new weapon, one that would strike at the heart of the Council's fleet. It wasn't just about defense anymore. It was time for Earth to fight back. We have one shot at this, Sarah said. Once their ships are within range, we'll launch our final counterattack. In space, the Council's fleet moved toward Earth, the massive ships cutting through the void with terrifying speed. The planet destroyer was ready, its energy core fully charged, its weapon systems locked onto Earth's cities. Vartal stood at the helm of the flagship staring at the blue and green planet below. Prepare to fire, Vartal ordered, his voice like ice. Commander Varric's fingers hovered over the command console. Ready, sir. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then, just as Varric was about to give the order to fire, something unexpected happened. The pulse generators on Earth activated once again, sending a wave of energy into space. Disruptions. Again, Varric shouted, his voice filled with frustration. Our targeting systems are failing. Vartal's eyes burned with fury. What is going on? Sir, their pulse generators are interfering with our systems. We can't lock onto Earth, the sensor officer cried. Vartal clenched his fists. We will not be stopped again. Override the systems. Fire manually. On Earth, the control room at Deep Space Command was tense. The pulse generators were working as planned, disrupting the Council's systems once more. But it wasn't enough to win the war. It was only delaying the inevitable. They're trying to override the systems, Parker said, his voice strained. We need to do more to stop them. Sarah turned to face him. It's time for the final phase. Activate the Earth's Defiant Strike. In space, the Council's fleet was in chaos. Their weapons were offline, their sensors scrambled, and now Earth was preparing its counterattack. Vartal could feel the weight of the moment. This was the end. Either they would crush the humans, or the humans would prove their strength. Once again, target the pulse generators, Vartal shouted. We can't let them disrupt our systems again. But it was too late. As the Council's ships fired their weapons, the humans launched their own strike, Earth's Defiant Strike. A wave of energy, more powerful than anything the Council had seen, erupted from Earth's surface, cutting through the space between the two forces. The pulse generators amplified the attack, sending a shockwave of energy directly into the heart of the Council's fleet. The ships were thrown into disarray. The planet destroyer struggled to power up, its energy core flickering dangerously. Earth's strike had disrupted the weapon long enough to give the humans a fighting chance. At Deep Space Command, Sarah watched as the Defiant Strike collided with the Council's fleet. The image on the screen was a stunning display of power, a wave of energy, bright and fierce, tearing through space. We've done it, Jackson said, his voice filled with awe. They can't recover from this. Sarah's face remained calm, but inside she felt a surge of hope. The Council's fleet was in ruins. The planet destroyer was powerless, and Earth had finally shown the galaxy that they would not bow to anyone. In space, the Council's flagship was falling apart. Vartal and Varric stood on the bridge, watching in disbelief as the fleet broke apart. The defiant strike had crippled their ships, their weapons useless. The Council's power was fading fast. "We've lost," Vartal said, his voice heavy with defeat. Varric, who had seen the power of Earth firsthand, nodded. "It's over. Earth has won." On Earth, the celebration had already begun. The fight was far from over, but the humans had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. Earth had fought back, and the Council had learned that no one could crush the human spirit. As Sarah stood before her team, she knew the war wasn't truly finished. The galaxy had seen what Earth was capable of, but the fight for freedom was never over. But now Earth had earned its place in the stars. "We've won," Sarah said, her voice strong and proud. "But this is just the beginning. We'll fight for our future. We'll fight for the freedom of all who stand with us."